Thank you, everybody. I'm most excited to present to you this character. He's my successor, taking over the presidency for the WVMA for the new year. And he be Jerry Ellis. And he'll be talking to you about controlling noxious weeds in a bare ground situation with the right herbicides. Afternoon, Jerry.
Thank you. One thing, I am here to help Jim today because he usually needs it. But if you are wondering about Oregon and Idaho credits, we are giving those out too. So I noticed that on a few of the questions they were asked about Oregon credits. So, and that's going to be today and tomorrow, and then possibly Friday for Oregon. We're checking into that still. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and get going. My talk today, as I mentioned before,
Jerry, we can see your slide previews.
You don't see them?
We do see the previews. So if you go to display settings and choose swap.
Sorry about that.
No worries. Beautiful.
How's that?
Perfect.
Okay, so my talk today is controlling noxious weeds in bare ground situations with the right herbicide. One thing, usually I have to assume that you're all calibrated when you're spraying, and this is probably the hardest thing to do, that because most people aren't calibrated. And it used to be when we were spraying a lot of products like Crowbar, Sahara, Diaron, we're at high rates. But now we got new products like Esplanade, Piper, and products like that that are low rates. So bare ground products today aren't as forgiving as they used to be 20 or 30 years ago, just because of that reason. So that's one thing I tell people: if you're not calibrated, you need to make sure that you're calibrated. And of course, the goal is to try to get a full year of residual out of your herbicides that you use. It used to be, we used to be able to get sometimes 5 years out of some of these products, but most of the time we weren't calibrated 30 years ago, and we probably put down 30 pounds of Crowbar. On the east side of the mountains of the Cascade Range, where we deal with probably 5 or 6 major weeds like kochia, Russian thistle, cheatgrass, and a few other weeds like that. So I would tell you, I'm going to go through a lot of different mixes today, and it's probably going to be good that you get with myself or the other distributor reps or the other manufacturers to talk about what kind of mixes you should use. But the thing that we always need to know before we talk to you is what kind of weeds you want controlled along the roads, because every county we get into, or even along the DOT roads, everybody has different weeds that they're wanting to control, and it's usually because of what the Noxious Weed Board wants at that point in time, or maybe it may be what your commissioners or somebody like that along the roads want to control. So we do need to know what kind of weeds you are wanting to control, and I'm going to talk about some of the products and what weeds they will control, and of course there's going to be a lot of different mixes. The other thing is there's a lot of things that you got to take in consideration. I already mentioned calibration. Spray timing is very important. On the west side, you guys probably don't have to worry about this as much, but a lot of times we don't get a lot of rain over here from May 5th to October 15th. So if you're thinking about spraying your bare ground products in June or July, you need rain to incorporate them and get them to work. And most of the time the weeds are up by that time too. So of course you got to put glyphosate to kill a lot of the weeds, because a lot of products won't work because they're pre-emergence only. So think about when you're going to spray. So usually in the spring, if we have no snow, we're spraying from January to usually the end of April, because usually we get May rains, because that's when they cut hay here. And so this year we had a lot of rains at the beginning of May. But even then, we didn't have rain from the end of March to the end of April. And some of these products can only lay on top of the soil for about 2 weeks, and they start to break down. So it's very, very important that you do get moisture to incorporate these products. In the fall, usually October to November is a good time, but you got to remember you got to use higher rates, and I'll mention why a little bit later. When talking about kochia, Russian thistle, and some of these other annual weeds, there's a lot of issues that you got to think about with them, and usually those are the ones that we're dealing with a lot over here. Kochia germinates in the upper quarter inch of the soil, so if you're using products that leach, especially if you're spraying them in the fall, you may not get some of that kochia because the herbicide leached below the germination level of that weed. So it's very important that you try to pick products that will stay higher in the soil profile. And most of the time, kochia will come up in March and April. So usually if you get your herbicide down before that, usually it works pretty good. Puncture vine, this is one that germinates later. So usually May is when it germinates and can go all the way into October if it stays nice. So you need to get your products down before April usually. The thing about it, the seeds last about 5 years in the soil, so that's why you want to control it. I put cheatgrass or downy brome in here, and a lot of people probably don't really worry about cheatgrass or downy brome, but out of all the weeds that I see usually escape and become an issue is actually cheatgrass. And I'll talk about Russian thistle. That's another one that I have on the next slide. But usually cheatgrass or downy brome comes up in the late fall, can come up over the winter time. And if you're doing a spring application, you need to put glyphosate or something in there to kill it if it's up. I always tell people you need to put glyphosate in your spring applications, even though it looks bare out there, because downy brome or cheat or Russian thistle, they come up very early. And I see Russian thistle, it will germinate in February. And so if you don't put glyphosate in some of these mixes to kill those germinated weeds, they will escape. And that's usually what I see is usually escape Russian thistle and cheatgrass that was already up, and most people sprayed in March and the pre-emergence didn't work on them because they were already up. So even though it looks clean out there, a lot of these weeds are very small looking and it's tough to see them. So it's always good to put glyphosate in there to make sure you kill anything. The other thing that we always need to talk about is herbicide resistance. Years ago, we figured out that there were kochia and Russian thistle became resistant to several different herbicide groups. So I always tell people it's good to rotate your herbicide group about every 3 or 4 years. That way the resistance doesn't start up. If you need to know what to go on the internet, type in Weed Society of American, and it will have a list of herbicide sites and action classifications. So if you need to look up the active ingredient to see what it's in, a lot of labels now are starting to put the herbicide groups on them. So like in Clean Tracks, which I'll talk about later today, as you could see, usually group 2 and group 14 are the 2 herbicide groups that are in there. Piper has 2 groups too. It has a group 14 and a group 15. So some of these labels do have the herbicide groups on them, which is nice. So look for them, and that can tell you too. Another issue that we're starting to see, we know that Russian thistle around the Lynn area, which is kind of in the middle of this Washington state, is resistant to glyphosate. So sometimes glyphosate will not kill the weeds that are up, and if that's the case, then you could switch to products like Axe, Cheetah Pro, or Finale, which is the glufosinate products, Detail, Scythe, or Venue. Any of those products will help you burn down those weeds, and you could add it to the glyphosate too if you want to keep that in there still, and that will help to kill those weeds that are up too. Sometimes it's because if you have very hard water, that glyphosate is tied up by hard water, so adding a water conditioner will help to combat that hard water too. Our water conditioner is Bronc Max, and usually you're at 2 quarts per 100 gallons of water. And you would have to add a water conditioner to like Cheetah Pro or Finale. That glufosinate family is sensitive to hard water too. The Axe, the Detail, the Scythe, and Venue are not sensitive to hard water. So you could use those products without it. So some precautions to go over before you start to spray too. You do need water at least a half an inch. If you are spraying out products, to incorporate them. If you're using dry products like Crowbar, Diaron 80DF, Mojave or Mazaron, which are Sahara products, generics, You could add a surfactant into the water to help absorb the water into those products because they're a clay-based material. If you're using SU chemistry, you got to make sure it's broke down, especially if you're using side-by-sides or four-wheelers, because sometimes those pumps don't break down the SU chemistry very good. And products like that would be like Telar, Allis XP, Escort XP, Matrix, or Laramie, or Esplanade Sure. You could use our product Climb in there to break it down. Cold water usually prevents it from breaking down, so that's usually one of the issues you run into. But I've found that using a paint stirrer and a drill and a 5-gallon bucket and beating it to death for a minute or two usually gets those products into the suspension, and normally they don't fall out after you do that. So, because you'll find out in your side-by-sides or four-wheelers, if you're using them, that usually these products will end up in your filter if they're not broke down correctly. The other thing is, I had a customer a couple of years ago. He used to like to spray on snow. In this state, you're not allowed to spray on snow, even though it does help to incorporate it. And there again, you don't want to spray on frozen ground because normally you will get runoff of your Bareground products on frozen ground. So make sure it's thawed out. The other thing I've seen, if you're spraying on gravel parking lots and there's no soil mixed in with that gravel, these herbicides still will move through those gravel areas. So you got to watch because they can run out into a lawn or an area like that and kill brush or trees that are next to that. The other thing I found, using 30 gallons of water per acre is fine to do, but 50 gallons is the best. I've seen this a couple times, and I've seen where a customer was spraying 30 gallons per acre, and then another customer sprayed right next to him at 50 gallons per acre, especially in the fall. They used the same product, and the 50 gallons per acre gave a better result in kochia and Russian thistle and other weeds. So I would tell people to stay at 50 gallons per acre. I'm going to be talking about products today that will bang or kill trees. Normally, the rule of thumb is stay 1.5 times the height of the tree away from them, and usually on a 10-foot tree, that means 15 feet. The other thing is if you're spraying next to vineyards, usually their roots go up 40 feet. So that's something to keep in mind when you're spraying next to a vineyard or even some shrubs. Products that do leach, Crowbar, Sahara, which is no longer made, but Mojave and Imazaron are, and Imazapyr, Spike, Diaron, all those products do leach out usually a foot or two. So you do need to watch out for those products. Method, Milestone, and TerraView don't leach out, but if you're spraying close to trees, you could bang them. So I would stay away from trees and shrubs, especially arborvitae, with any of those products, and I'll talk about that later. Early spring, we may not get the moisture, so there are people that will run a water truck over an area if they've sprayed to incorporate it. You can do that, but usually a water truck, because you're running over there, could cause dust to come up or things like that. So it's usually not a good way to incorporate the products, but I've seen it done. And usually with spring spraying, normally we're going over more of the winter annuals or growing areas. And again, you want to keep the product usually in the upper ½ inch of the soil. We have a soil retention agent called Epicax that you could use at 8 ounces per acre that does keep the herbicides in the soil higher, and usually for a month to 2 months longer. And usually for kochia and Russian thistle, that's good. And normally we're adding a quart per acre of glyphosate. Again, late fall, it's pretty much the same thing as the spring. The thing is normally I tell people you need to use your top rates then, because normally you lose 5% of your product each month. And so that's why instead of using like 5 ounces of Esplanade, usually we tell people to use 7 ounces because of that, because you are losing some of the product over the winter because of snow or rain. And again, normally I would tell people to add a quart of glyphosate in there. Talking about these initial pre-emergent applications going into products, usually these are areas that haven't been cleaned up or been untreated for years. These products usually will kill trees. You do have to watch slopes, and will leach at least a foot or more. The thing that's nice about these products I'm going to talk about in the next few slides is that they kill not only the annual weeds, but if you have biennial or perennial weeds, they will kill them too. So if you have sagebrush, Dalmatian toadflax, Russian knapweed, weeds like that are more perennials and biennials, Scotch thistle. Usually these products will take care of that. Probably the one that's been around, I wouldn't say the longest, but been out there for a long time. If you do a fall treatment, Crovar is out there. It's now called Crovar IBM. The generic, it's called Bromacell 4040. It's a group 5 and 7 herbicides, so 2 different groups. Normally we're at 12 pounds per acre. It used to be you could just get it in 6-pound bags, but they brought the 25-pound bags back again. The one thing that's bad about this product, it does have Diaron in it, and it does ask you to wear a respirator mask. And any of the Diaron products will have that respirator mask on there that you're supposed to wear when you're mixing or spraying. So, but again, this product will work on perennials. You also have the products that are the Sahara generics like Mojave or Mazaron out there. Again, fall treatment, 12 pounds per acre. You got group 2 and 7. And again, these come in 5 or 10-pound bags. Again, they have Diaron in them too, so you have to wear that respirator mask. Spring treatments, that's where you could drop down a little bit on Crovar. You can go from 12 to 10 pounds per acre. With the Sahara, Mojave, or Mazaron, you can drop down to 10 pounds on it too. So that's where your 5% is a month. If you don't want to use dry products but want to use the Sahara liquid mix, this is a mix that's out there, and it's one of the more inexpensive ones. You can use the Mazapure 2SL or Polaris, which are 2-pound materials, or Arsenal 2. They're group 2. You would be at like 3 to 4 pints per acre. You don't want to spray on moving sand or sandy soils next to crops because Mazapure will move out in the field. It is a group 2. And you can mix it with Diaron at 2.5 gallons per acre, or if you want to use a dry, 12 pounds per 80 DF. It's a group 7. The thing that's nice about this mix versus the 10 pounds of Mojave or Mazaron is that you actually have more Diaron and more Mazapure in there. So you actually will get a better kill with this mix. The other thing is that normally after 3 years, we do see some resistance popping up with Russian thistle. We know with the Mazapure that will happen. So you got to watch that. If you're thinking about spraying salt grass, you want to treat more the end of May, June, or July with this treatment on salt grass because it usually is dormant until then. So you got to hit it when it's actively growing. But we're good on Goshen Russian thistle too, and usually you're at 2 pounds per acre. You can mix it with Diaron at 2.5 gallons. Again, you got to wear the respirator because of the Diaron. Plainview has been out for a couple of years. I'm sorry, I spelled it wrong. I already caught that, but so it is Plainview with no IN in between the plain and the view. SC, it's a liquid. It's group 29. It actually has 3 active ingredients in it. Has indazolithlam in it, aminocyclopyrachlor, and imazapyr. And normally you'd be at a 64-ounce rate. So if you want one that's going to kill everything, both grasses and broadleaves, you have that. Now these next products don't leach as bad as like the Crovar or Sahara mixes would, but you still have to watch out for them because of they will bang or kill trees. You still need to add glyphosate in there to kill any weeds that are up. The previous products I mentioned will usually kill weeds that are 6 inches or smaller. So you really don't need to add glyphosate to any of the mixes I just talked about. But again, I would add Efficax at 8 ounces per acre. You got Method, normally 12 to 18 ounces per acre. Again, these work on biennials or perennials too. You can mix it with Espinade at 5 to 7 ounces, depending on whether you're spraying in the fall or spring, and you have different herbicide groups here. Perspective is no longer made, and there's still a little bit out there, but I'm sure after this year you're going to see it pretty much gone. Telar is our Perspective is a mix of Telar and Method, and usually if you're going after Scouring Rush or Aquazium or Mare's Tail, normally Telar is what we'd add in at 2 ounces per acre, which is in a group 2, and then Method at 12 to 18 ounces per acre, which is a group 14, and Espinade at 5 to 7. So again, this will don't use near trees or shrubs, but it's a great mix to pick up your kosher Russian thistle, Scouring Rush, and things like that. If you're just basically wanting something that's a little stronger on perennial grasses, you could add Ellis in there at 4 ounces per acre. Make sure you're not spraying on blowing ground, because that's where all the lawsuits happened about 20 years ago. So you don't want to spray on blowing ground. You want stable ground at 4 ounces per acre of the Ellis, with method again at 12 to 18 ounces, and Esplanade at 5 to 7. Landmark is no longer made to. It was a mix of Telar and Ellis, and you can mix 2 ounces of Telar with 4 ounces of Ellis, and you get your Landmark, and you can mix that with Esplanade. And this mix would be a very good mix over on the west side, especially for scouring rush and mare's tail. The new product that Rob's going to be talking about a little bit later is TerraView from Corteva. On the Bareground non-crop or complete vegetation part of the label, it does say you can go to 5.7 ounces per acre. It's a dry product. We'll pick up your perennial broadleaves. It's a group 4. And you can mix it with the Esplanade at 5 to 7 ounces, which is group 29. You could also mix the TerraView with Piper. That way you got a grass herbicide in the Piper, which is a group 14 and 15 at 10 ounces per acre. Now, these next mixes I'm going to talk about would not end up banging trees. So you could spray these next 2 trees, but they are pre-emergent products only. So you do need to add glyphosate in at 1 quart per acre, and that's usually a 4-pound glyphosate, and Efficax at 8 ounces. And they only work on annuals. And I'll talk about what you could put in for some perennial or biennial control that would be safe to these mixes a little bit later. You could do sulfentrazone, which would be Portfolio 4F at 10 to 12 ounces per acre, which is group 14, and Esplanade, that is a group 29 at 5 to 7 ounces. This mix is strong on prickly lettuce, mare's tail, puncture vine, kochia, and Russian thistle. We use this mix a lot over here on the east side of the mountains. You could also use the Flumi products, which you got Payload, Promenade, Flumigard, and Lockdown, that are all Flumi products. They're in a group 14. You could use 10 to 12 ounces per acre of them with Esplanade at 5 to 7 ounces, but do not spray around pears, because we do know that there's been issues with the Flumi products around pears. Another mix you could do would be Frequency at 8 ounces per acre, which is group 27, and Esplanade 200 at 5 to 7 ounces, a group 29, and that's very safe around trees and shrubs too. Frequency has a turf label, and it's called Pilex, and you're only at 1 ounce per acre with the Pilex, but Frequency is fairly safe if you are spraying near trees too. Again, not around pear trees, but you could do Frequency at 8 ounces with Piper at 10 ounces, and you would control your annual grasses and your annual broadleaves with that, kochia, Russian thistle, and mare's tail. Another mix you could use is Frequency at 8 ounces with Clean Trax at 4 pints per acre. Clean Trax is also called Pindar in the tree fruit industry, so that's how come we know it's safe around most trees, because they're using the Pindar around apple trees and other fruit trees. It's a group 2 and a group 14 mix. So again, you got a product in there that works on grasses. And so you'll pick up your annual grasses and annual broadleaves with that. And don't forget that there are still, you still got Pendulum Aquacap, which is Prowl on the agriculture side at 1 gallon per acre. You got Surfland and Prodimene. I call them the orange products, or the dinitro products. They're still out there. You usually only get 8 months of control with them, but if you use them in the spring and then add them to either Esplanade or Piper or Clean Trax, that's a good mix to use that's safe around trees and shrubs too. Now, if you do have some biennials or perennials out there.
Hey, Jerry, we're at about 3 minutes left.
Okay. Which be like Canada thistle, common mullein, or spotted knapweed. Any of the previous mixes I talked about, the soft ones, you could add Transline, which is group 4, in at 12 to 16 ounces per acre. That would pick up some of those. And so that's what I have some people do because Transline is fairly safe around arborvitaes and areas like that. The last 2 slides I have, I know vineyards are a big issue that people always ask what to spray next to them. I usually tell them to use a Payload like product at 10 ounces per acre, and Esplanade 200 SC at 5 ounces per acre, because payload is called Chateau on the vineyard side, and Espinad's called Allian on the vineyard side. And both those products are labeled in the vineyard. So if you're spraying next to them, you're basically using the same thing that the vineyard guys are doing, so that we know that's safe. And again, you're adding the Efficax and the glyphosate in there if you're killing any weeds that are up too. So that they work very well. Next to fruit orchards like apples and stuff, you can use Clean Tracks at 4 pints per acre. It's called Pindar in the orchard, and with Espinad, which is called Allion in the tree fruit orchards, and at 5 ounces. And again, you got 3 different herbicide groups that you would do there. And that's all I had. So if you have any questions, there's my information. You can either give me a call or email me. I'll pretty much be on these conference calls for the next 2 days too. So probably next week could be the best when I can get back to you. But with that, I guess, is there any questions?
There were a few. Here's one. In a Bareground fall application, when you get an early snow in October, do you stop spraying or spray over top of the snow?
You can't spray over top the snow, so you got to wait for it to melt before you could spray. But then you could spray because most of the time the ground's not froze underneath of it. So.
Great, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Jerry. Good job. A lot of information that's very useful.